I want to respect everybody's time. So, managing expectations, my wife taught me a valuable lesson. We went to Vegas. Paul had his escorts in Vegas joke, but this is a little bit different. Same client, I was in Vegas for work. I mentioned that I had dinner and a show tickets for tonight, get ready. And she was all excited, got the dress on, was ready to go, and then she said, well, where are we going? And I mentioned it was a small place off strip, and I said, I got an amazing deal. And then her face changed, she smiled, put the jeans back on, took off the shoes, and said, all right, now I'm gonna reset my expectations for what this is gonna be tonight. It was the most ridiculous comedy and terrible food that we just laughed through the situation together, but we had a good time. So, lower your expectations is the method I'm trying to get to. Thank you. This is something that I've had access to for a few months. We pushed really hard to get it, and so we wanted to give you as much of a preview as possible. And I don't have any live data or clients that I know that have worked with it that I can actually share real working experience with. But it's important for this community to see what's happening, see what's changing in the future, and then hopefully motivate you guys to think about how you can prepare. The last session will help with that as well. So, to that end, we're gonna set the foundation for what is ESMS. We're gonna get into some new terminology, how to navigate it, what are the basics of it, what used to be called inspections, how are they handled here. It is very different. My most exciting part of this since I've been digging in is work. ESMS has a more broad adoption for what it means to maintain and sustain your facilities. It's not just about full replacement and repairs anymore. And we know that there are a lot of new people in the room. I'm gonna talk with the expectation that you have a passing knowledge in Builder. If you're brand new, and I saw the survey early, there are some people that are brand new to this. Hopefully the morning session helped. If not, you're just gonna have to work with me because to get through this much massive material in 3 hours, I'm gonna have to go pretty fast. And then let's get into it. So, ESMS is not ESMS. It's not a terrible way to pronounce Christmas. It is not the new messaging platform that's gonna tell you when you're being ignored. It is the Enterprise Sustainment Management System. It is being developed and created by the Technical Center of Expertise, the SMS Technical Center of Expertise out of Champaign, Illinois. So, I'm civilian, but I am an engineer. I like to have a construct that makes sense to me. What I greatly appreciate is mission statements. It really helps me understand what people are trying to do and what they're actually trying to accomplish. So I go back to the SMS Technical Center of Expertise is within ERDIC and CERL. CERL's mission is to deliver vital engineering solutions in collaboration with our partners to secure our nation, energize our economy, and reduce disaster risk. This is gonna play a key part in maintaining those installations, and I see risk and economy. So, being a good steward of money, not having failures. ERDIC is to strive to be the world's premier public engineering and environmental services research and development organization. So, this is going to be research-based. There is no black box that you cannot ask the question of why does it do that? People think of this in a different way than your typical commercial product development cycle, where they want to hide all the special sauce behind closed doors and say this is our own intellectual property. The ERDIC CERL team is absolutely taking this research seriously, and they are publishing papers on their results, and they're using it to inform this product. So, research and development, this is continually refined, continually invested in, and you can get to why it does what it does. And then lastly, the individual department, the SMS Technical Center of Expertise, helps real property asset managers and stakeholders decide when, where, and how to best maintain existing infrastructure. That's a lot, but in my mind, I think of SMS as a tool to help you Secure and spend your resources to reduce the greatest risk to your real property portfolio. Get your mission done by reducing risk in the most optimal way possible across all real property. A lot of the conversations are going to be builder-centric, but ESMS is now a common platform, so it's going to apply to everything. But that's my background. That's the lens that I see the world through. And I'm excited because the same team that was involved with the past decades of builder, roofer, railer, paver are leading the development of this SMS product. So they're going to be specifically looking to address past pain points. They're trying to fix problems that they didn't have a good answer to. We've all been in those meetings of, well, can you do this? And they go, oh man, I wish I could. I can't. I understand why you need that now, but it's not designed to support that. This is going to solve some of your pain. So, just to, I'm not going to be so brave as to put a timeline on the x-axis. Remember, we've been talking about this since 2018, so any date that I'm not responsible for, I do not put out there. But for this audience, we have a huge install base of builder. There's a lot of momentum in that product. We have users. It is going to sunset. This is going to eventually not take on new releases, and the user base is going to dwindle over time. With that, especially the facilities domain, you're going to see an ESMS growth. Already, I know contracts have been issued for this migration preparation. We're under contract to help another agency out there. So people are starting to think and starting to plan and spend money. I think that that's just going to accelerate. Last year, I closed the Builder Summit with announcement of, this is the last Builder Summit because, as you can see, ESMS is the thing. We've talked around domains, but I do want to get into a specific definition. The way that they are moving forward with this ESMS platform is to say that while these separate stovepipe products have existed for a long time, paver has been around for decades, roofer has been around for decades, it is frustrating if you are running Fort Benning and you're trying to see what are the conditions of my real property, and you have to try to run reports from different servers on different systems, blend them, and then they don't exactly line up. It's hard to compare apples to apples or get a holistic view from the built environment. So this is trying to address that with the concept of domain. So a domain is specifically an area of your real property. It's going to have a unique catalog. You can have specific assessment types. You can have different principles about how you go about gathering information from an inventory and assessment perspective, but at the end of the day, you have a life cycle condition. You have the ability to understand its quantification. How much does this cost? When does it plan on no longer being reliable? So the life cycle component is still foundational to every domain. And your first little screenshot of the app, trust me, within 137 slides, you're going to get more. But you as the user get to identify what domain am I working in today. So whether it's the facility building domain or it's one of the exciting utilities that has been what actually started the development of the ESMS was the utilities. So they have a more fleshed out electrical, water, sewer, gas, you name it. You can appreciate that the catalog of available components is going to be different between a waterfront structure and a fuel transportation. It's going to be different stuff. You're going to need to quantify it in a different way. You might want to use GIS differently. So it's okay that they are unique, but they still need to be viewed within the same infrastructure and the same database. And your rights from a user, you may only see one of these. You may see them all. You may have edit privileges in one. That domain is going to be able to be set for your individual permission. I'm not the only one talking about ESMS this week. So while I say lower your expectations for my knowledge and my experience, I'm going to try to use up every possible minute of this afternoon so there's no time for questions. You have pens and notepads, write down your questions. Wait for Matt tomorrow. It's going to be a great session. So Matt is from the Technical Center of Expertise. He's on the ground every day managing the development and communicating with leadership on what's next. So he's going to give you more of a live demo and actually look at reports and be available for questions. And then the last thing that we're doing for this summit is to have a workshop to talk about preparing for migration. Hopefully there's some ideas that you come up with today that you want to share with people, write it down, and then let's workshop it as a community. A lot of people need to get their data ready, get their users ready. How are they going to do it? I mean, I know that there's a 900-page Army SMS manual for Builder. What about ESMS? It's going to look different. It's going to sound different. Is there a plan to rewrite that? All right. So you have low expectations, ready to go. Logging in. I'm giving you as much information as possible, starting from just getting a username and password. Paul, I see you somewhere. No more sticky notes. This is built upon Azure authentication, which has a basis in two-factor authentication and single sign-on. The general idea is that if you use a CAT card or you have another kind of a managed approval domain, you can run it through this Azure environment so you don't have another just username and password credential to manage, forget, lose, have to secure. In this environment of NIST compliance and information security, passwords are becoming, not desired. So we want to leverage those single sign-on environments that if your business account is still active, you can still get permissions in. If your CAT card expires at the end of the month, well, your login and credentials will probably also fail at the end of the month into SMS. Actually getting a staging account, I think Matt's going to talk about that, but just know that to begin the process right now, you need a CAC. It's being hosted out of DISA. And now, our first screen of the day of when you log in, what do you see? We've just cut the browser URL out of the top, but that is what is in this. It is a web-based application, just like Builder. But when I say just like, it's obviously completely rewritten from scratch. There is going to be no more right-clicking to do things in the browser to say do an action. That's kind of an older school technology. The pop-ups are handled in a more web standard way, so you don't have a problem with your laptop no longer being able to see all of scenarios. So it is being built on modern infrastructure. And from a general navigation, this left-hand panel is not for your tree of pluses and minuses anymore. You don't have to navigate up and down the hierarchy. It's more functionality on the left, and then your primary window is going to display what you're trying to do. When you log in and it doesn't know necessarily what you're trying to accomplish, it goes directly into your favorites and where have you been recently. It's a fairly natural occurrence that what I did at the end of last week is probably what I'm going to start doing at the beginning of this week. So ESMS remembers your user activity and gives you the ability to deep link directly to what you were last on. Just trying to save you a click. A lot of these screenshots are going to be a bit of a eye test chart. We upgraded the screens this year, so trying to make it as readable as possible. But if you go on to the summit, smssummit.com resources, you'll see that there is a PDF for all of these slides online right now. You can bring it up, show it on your laptop. Occasionally I've seen people take pictures of the projector, know that you don't necessarily need to do that. You can save this file and refer to it back to it later. Or if you want to just make comments in your PDF editor, it's a great way to say, hey, I need to check this out later. Back to navigation. The help is going to be an area that you are probably very familiar with if you've used the Builder help. It has the ability to do context-sensitive search. So if you are in a certain area of the application and you ask for help, it's going to give you information contextual to where you are. But I will say, from somebody that read a lot of those help, some of the content is still pre-COVID. I've seen 2019 dates. And if we know anything about this world, it is a different place than 2019. So give the SMS team a little bit of time. I'm sure they're going to continue to re-update all the help sections. Some of the functions and features that are called out don't quite work right. But it's a living document, and it's going to get better. I mentioned permissions. So before we get into inventory, let's just talk about your user credential itself. The highest level filter you can have is a domain. So if you are exclusively working in a facility's domain, that's all you're going to see, and that's all you're going to have access to. After that, you can get down to where am I supposed to be working, an organization or a site, and then what am I working with in that domain, in that area of the organization. It comes down to assets and components. Your facilities in this universe are considered an asset. If it's a utility and it's your stormwater, that's an asset. The individual components that build that together are just the next level below it. So when you think about your permissions, you're saying, well, from an asset perspective, in the interface it says, do you have no capabilities? You don't see anything. We're not even going to let you look at it. Can you read it? This is the great default safe valve for people that don't want to mess up the data. Can I create something in that space? Can I update? And then can I delete? These permissions are cumulative, so being able to delete means you also have the ability to update and create. Full disclosure, I don't have an admin privilege. I had to go to the interface and then go to the help sections, but here's what you see. It has a couple of preset permission types. There are 4 that are specifically called out: curator, assessor, work planner, and assessment supervisor. These are available to everyone, but you might notice that there's a named like John Doe. So we can have a special user type for a special person in your organization. The benefit of having a couple of common ones like curator, which is your read-only person, is that you can assign that easily and repeatedly to a lot of different people as they get involved with your program. But if somebody needs a special, hey, this is my real property person, I don't want them to mess with components at all. They're never going to give me an understanding of the condition of my cooling tower, but I do want them to update my facility asset square footage because they're real property and that's their world. You can create a role just for them. So, zooming in, you can see for Herbert, he has the ability to create building assets, and then with the components within that, he can delete, create, update, and see them. But he does not have the ability to delete a building. So, I mentioned that this is solving legacy problems with Builder. A inventory editor in Builder, once you could, add anything, you could also delete buildings, delete sites. You had complete carte blanche on everything on that screen. They're trying to remove that and say, let's be a little bit more direct and appropriate to what that person needs to do. This is all about reducing risk to data corruption or data problems. We've had problems with people creating buildings in the wrong space. They just were an assessment team, they saw a shed, and they're like, oh, I want to put that shed somewhere. I can't find it. Let me just create a building. And they don't tell anybody that they did a found on site, and then you just have this mystery building that doesn't have any place to report to. So you can control that and lock down that facility create process to just who is actually responsible for that role. So I'm John Doe in this environment. You can get into and log in, see your user preferences in the top right, and then see what my specific permissions are. And this is where it's really exciting, because we've had the ability to have a read-only person, we have an assessment supervisor person, but you have one role in Builder that applies to anywhere you have access to. In this environment, I can say, I'm a consultant, this is great, I want to be able to see everything, but only edit within this specific location or site. I'm a Fort Hood person, I want to be able to see what all of IMCOM in that region is, but really I'm going to have only edit privileges to my installation. So multiple permissions at multiple levels of the hierarchy solves that problem of one role fits them all. Any questions on permissions and before we jump into inventory? That's great, because in this environment, everything that I put on the slide and everything I talk to you is everything that I know. So you can ask the questions, and I'm going to hold on to them for later, and I'll talk to Matt, but probably not going to have the answer for you. So we've done data reviews and data quality assurance for years. Since Digon is not a large-scale assessment firm, but we do look at data, we build apps and that sort of thing. We actually have a QA tool. I've learned, try not to pick on somebody in the room with real data. I did not see Space Force register. So guess who I'm going to talk about as a representative organization. And if you need to give me a number, I'm sure they got to talk to somebody. So within the Space Force, I see the sites, Patrick, Buckley, Peterson, Shriver, and the rest. That organization and site structure is going to be nothing new. Your facilities within those are nothing new. What is different is from an inventory perspective, right after you get to a facility, it's components. And if you think about the broad approach to domains, not everything goes in the uniformat structure really nicely. We've had people use Builder to try to capture site elements, and it's always a little awkward. Is my lightning protection one component, or is it the building, or is my guard shack a structure? It's trying to push a round peg in a square hole. So this being trying to solve all the domains problems is saying, I'm going to have a real property asset record. That's the reporting level of ESMS. And then within it, you have the ability to set up one or multiple components. Components are the thing that matter now. That's what you measure. That's what has a replacement cost. And that's what you eventually have an assessment for. I know it's crazy. I've been saying sections for a decade, and I have to just physically stop myself every time I want to when I was preparing for this. We're going to also talk about how they can group things and jump into the fact that it's not all about uniformat anymore. So, your nested tree of pluses and the pinwheel of death when you wait for that next level to load is no more. I'm sorry to say you're going to have to let go of that eventually and get ready for lists. Within that left panel, you now have the ability to dig into your inventory just like before, but it's not separated out between your inspection data and your inventory data. You're going to see it all on the same screen. And no pyramid. Back to the eye test chart. Logging in, and if I navigate to, so what we're going to be doing for the rest of the presentation a lot is seeing in the green box what I've navigated to. That's the function space, and what is in the primary window for being able to perform actions. Within organizations, you have the general information that you've known and seen for a long time. Is this the DoD? Is this Space Force? Kind of what is my overall condition? What is my functionality score? You can drill down, you see that sites are available within that organization, so it's on page. And then you also have associated sites. DoD, oh, you got to come to a mic. All right. So you can absolutely have multiple organizations. Sorry.
The reason I'm asking this is, despite what my name tag may say, I'm not actually from Joint Munitions Command, and I do not care what Joint Munitions Command is doing in their buildings at Picatinny. I care about what Armaments Center is doing, and Armaments is a subset of DevCom. DevCom's a subset of AFC. So if I wanted, say, the Armaments Center's people to have organizational access to the Armaments Center's buildings, I would need to set up an organization for Armaments Center. Next level would be DevCom, next level would be me at AFC, and after that would be, I don't know, DHE9. So yes, you can set up multiple organizations so that you have Russian nesting dolls of permissions under that.
Yes, and if you actually look, there are associated sites. So in your kind of program creation or spin-up process, we're talking about preparing for a migration. You'll certainly want to talk about what is your organization structure, because sites need to exist. But even where we had rigidity in the past, where a site could only exist within one organization, this little area shows associated sites. We have joint basing. We have, areas where you have overlapping responsibilities, where you might say, I'm in San Antonio, Joint Base San Antonio. It's not my installation RPUS ID, but I have a building in there that I really need to know its condition. So you can have those kind of associations to be able to build that responsibility and visibility. Have I done it yet? No, but I see that you can. Oh, I'm going to get you a work. All right, beautiful. At the top of the organization, you have your general information that I've already talked about. Funding, we're going to get into a little bit later when we talk about work, and then reference books. Your reference books are the same things that you've seen over and over again. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Your component importance index, one of the most underutilized aspects of Builder. This is where you get to say, for my organization, I can say that carpet tiles are not as important as transfer switches in all cases. At the component level, you can give it an importance number. This can be helpful for prioritization, that you can say, I always want a door with a secure, cipher code on it to be prioritized for work over a door without a cipher lock. You also have your service life book. This is still life cycle. So there is still a planned life for each one of your components. How long should that cooling tower, according to the manufacturers, last? You have your costs, which we're going to get into, which we're more detailed than ever before. I know that's exciting. And then cost modifiers. When we get down to the sites, there's not the visibility to a area cost factor directly like you used to have, but it is a modifier. So the foundation principle is, if we're in Hawaii, that work to install that roof is probably going to be different than Alabama. So therefore, let's put a modifier at that site level. One of the overarching themes that you're going to see is where Searle saw the opportunity to consolidate a functionality, they did. They had an area cost factor forever. Recently, they added cost modifiers. You could say this site also has a historic element to it. This building has a high security aspect that changes its cost. So you can get down really specific to the individual components or building assets to add modifiers, but you can also say area cost factor is just another type of modifier. So let's bundle it all just under that feature. All right, clicker has gone dead. All right. Under organizations is sites. This is your geographic region, just as normal, that has the same area cost factor, and it's a place that you can group your assets. Many times people think of it as a fence line, but that obviously gets confusing when you have fences within fences within fences. But you're thinking about a planning unit. This is the lowest level that you can change a permission. So if you're thinking about getting your data ready to move into ESMS, know that your site is the lowest level that you can assign a user to. Maybe that helps determine what you decide to group. This view is going to be something that you see over and over again. I mentioned that you're going to have to abandon the pluses and the minuses where you navigate up and down the hierarchy tree, but you are going to see a lot of lists. Those buttons there on the left allows you to download an Excel file, see that site on a map view. ESMS is designed from the beginning to support utilities. Utilities are very GIS-centric. So it has that out of the box. If you want to be able to place your site on a map, it can show you that. The next table is your charts and performance. No, that's all right. I'm okay. Thank you, Paul Teal. And then you can have a field chooser. This table doesn't always have to look like that. If you as a user say, I'm really not interested in my installation code, I don't use that in any of my sites, you can remove that from the list view, and maybe you can add something like total component replacement costs. So a little bit more flexibility in the interface to serve your purposes. And when you drive into that site, it's the same basic data as Builder, where you have a condition, functionality, performance, and facility condition index. We have in the past done a excruciating hour-long dive into what an FCI is versus a BCI. If that is something that you guys would like a review of, I'll point you to the right resource. But EFCI is a brand new term. Any guesses? It's actually the same calculation as FCI, but instead of just this current year, it's for whatever planning horizon you look forward to. For many organizations, their primary driver for using Builder was, give me a 5-year plan. I want to know what my 5-year horizon is. I want to know what my work needs are as a ratio to my PRV. That's my metric for reporting up and getting my defendable budget approved. EFCI just does that natively. It says, if you're looking out and planning for 5 years in the future, I'm going to give you your facility condition index for all unfunded work for that entire 5 years. I see a couple of nods and a couple of blank stares, but I'm going to have to get in there and play a little bit, but it's just the same basic thing for multiple years. You don't have to be locked into, if you have a question, you have to come to the mic. You're not locked into a scenario that only can do a certain locked-in data set for a certain number of years. Your analysis can run out for 20 years.
For EFCI, though, it's over the course of a few years. What happens if certain facilities are, they're going to be taken off of the real property? Is that accounted for, or? And then the other thing I'm wondering, when it comes to, we're narrowing it down to components.
Yes.
Why not systems are gone?
Yeah. Good question. So the uniformat system component kind of structure with like A10, A1020, you got the numbering scheme down. Classification is supported, but not mandatory. So it's just another attribute to your component. Your component's going to have to fit within a classification of some sort. And you can still report on it, but it's not as rigid as before. Okay. Your question about what if a building goes offline? In the past, you could create an inventory event that says this facility status is going to change. And I would assume that those type of features would be also available in ESMS. That you can say, in 2027, we're going to take that barracks facility offline, stop generating new work.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. And now this is where you can start to see the vision. At a site level, let's just say Buckley, for example, you can see your facilities FCI. You can see your transportation rail FCI, your electrical, water, gas, and water control structures within the same tab. So you're really 4 clicks in, and you can see where do I have organizational risk of my real property at an entire site level. The next step after you get through sites is your facilities. When you are drilling in directly from the site, you only have the ability to sort, but this is helpful because if you wanted to see what is my worst facility at Buckley, all you have to do from a facility condition index side is go to Buckley at your site, you see that facilities explosion plus, you see your list, and then hit your filter button right next to CI, and it ranks it from worst to best. Trying to help the user get to the information that they need faster, more streamlined. If you take a step out of the site view and go into the left navigation of facilities, it's the same list of buildings, but here is where you have the capability of doing an export to Excel, look at the map, look at the charts, and then actually change your fields. So this same list feature is available everywhere, but you have to actually be in that facilities area to see the list, not just an exploded view of the sites. Reporting wise, we're going to talk about it at the end, but the Power BI side is very visually stimulating. It allows you to drill in and explore your information. But this export to Excel is supposed to give you that, like, I need a worksheet to work with. Some people think through Excel, and so they need to be able to take it offline, put it into something where they can do averages and means, and then they have the ability to process the data. To create a building, or a facility in this case, you're within an organization, you're within a site. My permission says I only have the ability to create facilities from a building's perspective, and I have miscellaneous structures. So your permissions change the drop-down options available to you. And then go through and answer, is there a building number? How much? Do I have a PRV that I want to manually enter? What was the construction date? Operational status and mission dependency index. One thing that I will encourage every organization, and I know many are trying to explore this, MDI is an extremely powerful tool when you get overwhelmed with data. Data fatigue is a real thing. You're probably going to have it in another 5 minutes from seeing 138 slides. But when you just see too much information, you need to be able to say, what is important? What do I need to act on? Having a mission dependency index build at the facility level gives you saying, this is my data center. I cannot perform my mission without it. This is my laboratory that I cannot work without. This is my, you name the building for your needs, helps you rank what you need to pay attention to. And then in that field chooser area, when you see your buildings list, add MDI. And then you can say, I want to sort and look at my most critical facilities. Do I have anything that needs my attention today? So we've created a building, because you have the ability to add a description, add comments, add photos, and then I'm going to call out custom attributes. Attributes are available. They were recently added to Builder. But they are designed into it from the beginning now. It's not just a bolt-on. We have a client that uses a specific cost model for their building data, and there is not a good place to put a model code at the facility asset level in Builder. So they've just kind of hijacked the zip code field, and they're using zip code as a place to store this attribute, which is my model code. Here you can design it from the get-go to say, if you're stealing maybe historic or child-occupied checkbox to do something that's unnatural, put it as an attribute. You can create those on the fly, have that controlled, and as an organization, if you need something that's not by default available, make it so. For, Space Force, an attribute could be, is it launch critical? All right. Now something brand new. And as a preview, we've already been asked a question about uniformat, but groups. Went to the help section because I always go to the official definition when possible. A group is a collection of managed objects, code language, that may exist within a facility or across multiple facilities. This is Searle's answer to saying, how do I group things that are not necessarily hierarchical? It certainly adopts and embraces uniformat, but it's not exclusive to that classification structure. So, from a visual perspective, you're familiar with the building, you have systems, A10, B10, C30, down the list, the 15-ish uniformat systems. Your exterior enclosure system breaks down to exterior windows, walls, and doors, and then you have material category and component subtype. It's all very structured, and everything must only exist in one group at one time. In Builder, this could be maybe a filter system. I've seen people complain that, hey, I have this water filtration thing in my facility. I want to put it in my HVAC system because it serves that, but the only place that I can put it in is plumbing because of the Builder catalog. So we're changing that to allow this logical group. And this is where you have to be, as a program leadership or advisor, your knowledge leader, consultative to say what groups are necessary for my organization. To pick on Space Force, I imagine that they have gravity labs. I don't know, but it sounds like fun. I want to play. Again, call me. So within this gravity lab, I think that there's probably 3 buildings involved in this gravity research. And this is small scope. There's only 9 components that I'm going to call mechanical that are gravity lab related. Those are those little boxes. But 3 are labeled critical and mechanical, and 6 are critical in totality. So you get to draw your circles any way that you want, however you feel like you need to group things. DHA's in the room. We've had operating room that they've said, we need to be able to make sure that those things are maintained at a different level, that they are prioritized differently. If that, air handling unit serves an OR, it's more important to us than an air handler that serves an office building. So you can now add a critical or operating room specific group that says these assets across one or all your buildings classify as critical. Maybe contaminated. You name it. Is there the possibility of looking at and saying, could there be lead in this interior finish? So my caution is that this is not something to go crazy with. Just like sectioning, you can go overboard. You can have a floor group and then a room group and then a building wing group and a this team group. but every time that team moves around to a different office building, you've got to regroup your components. So this is used for understanding, what do I need to work on? Do I need to maintain it differently because it's in a different group? Or do I need to prioritize it differently because it's in a different group? So, real property, what money do I need, and where should I put it first? Yusuf. Just talk into it.
Do groups span sites?
Yes. So, please, think about and consider your grouping strategy. Go ahead.
My grouping strategy is exactly why I'm doing this. How easy is it to generate a group? Because the reason I'm asking, say you have a section of a building, you're absolutely right. It does not make sense to have a group that is tied to an administrative team, a bunch of people. How easy is it to generate a group? For instance, if you were going to, I don't know, plan a renovation built around a specific team occupying a specific space, how easy is it to generate the list of, okay, here's everything in that space, I need to generate the cost for that?
I need to compensate you after it. Let me know. If only I had about 37 screenshots to show you how I can create a group. But theory first, and then we'll get into the show it. Before I get into how easy is it to create a group, groups are not exclusive to components. You can also group buildings. So you're familiar with the complex idea in Builder, where you might have a housing complex, you might have a security fence line complex within a building, maybe a bunch of buildings that you plan on demolishing that are just sitting there, crumbling slowly. So you can create a group to capture those at the facility asset, but you have the same advantage of components where you can have it exist in different places at the same time. The complex, once a building was in one complex, it could not exist in another. Now, back to that Space Force gravity lab, if you have a barracks where just the people that are working on the gravity lab sleep in, it can be in the housing complex and it can be in the gravity lab complex. So, grouping is more flexible at the facility level. But let's see the interface. How easy is it to create a group? Well, it is right after facilities and before components in the interface. Once you select groups, hit that little plus button. And just like buildings, you have a very familiar pop-up window. It's just a different set of questions that it's going to ask you. It's going to say, is this exclusive to this site or multiple? Is it exclusive to this building or not? You can have a group that is specific to an area of uniformat. What type of group is this? Is it a functional area? Is it a security group complex? So identify the type, and then identify, is it restricted by uniformat? I could imagine that you might say that during a assessment of living space, you look for moisture contamination that we're not going to use the M word for. But you say, I only want to see things that fall under this problem of moisture contaminated in my interior components. So restrict it to uniformat sections that are just appropriate. Even down to the next level at the component. Once you've created the structure for what type of group you're creating, it's just a button that allows you to add a component, and you see for that building within that site, if you've limited to, or just within that area of uniformat, what components you can pick. You pick them one by one, and it's in a group. And then you hit save. So there are questions, and I think that there's certainly going to be some refinement to the interface, but the foundational principle is buildings and components can exist in one or multiple groups. Do so if it helps you understand how to identify a need and what priority should I give that need when it comes up. And I'm going to say it again because it's a big one. So, what about builder sections? I've lived and died on that, but the idea is the new planning unit is called components. The benefit, I think, of this is that it's an easier thing to communicate. For a person that has been doing training for a long time, I'm looking forward to saying components because it is more aligned with what people think about. Having facility assets, at a level for reporting, and then all the components that provide the building with its metrics. Those two as the really reliable elements to plan around make sense. You can do a systems integration and say, this is where my assets go, and this is where my components go. It really doesn't matter outside of that. Your components still are going to be driven by your life cycle. So picking the right catalog that has the right design life, that has the right replacement cost, those are going to be pivotal to your metrics working out, but where it is in between might be different depending upon your domain. So, now that we have a firm grasp of groups, let's move on to components. That list with all the same capabilities of export it to Excel, resort it, refilter it, see a chart, see a map. But if you drill into your component, you're dropped into what used to be your section inventory page where you can see photos and your metrics, your last inspection, that sort of thing. It is awesome that they put the photo as auto-loading because it helps the interface just be that much more engaging when you see things that you're looking at right away. Like, I'm looking at the air handler, I see a picture of an air handler, it's in bad shape, and I see my condition is in the 30s. Everything makes sense, and I have an idea of what I need to do next. Every time you have to click to explore or change tabs to an inspection, it just adds a layer of obfuscation that you've got to work harder to get the same information. I want to call out a couple of things that I love to see. We've talked about after an inspection in Builder, you have a remaining service life. So if you saw it and you see that it's in good shape, Builder says, oh, then you have a good long amount of remaining service life left, and then you don't need to plan to replace it anytime soon. And that's great, but sometimes you want to know, what is my remaining design life? Regardless of what the inspector saw, when does the factory think I need to replace this part? This is showed up right here as your RDL. So if somebody goes out to that water heater that's 20 years old, rates it green, Builder might say, oh, you don't need to replace that water heater for another 15 years. Great. But then you go to your remaining design life and go, well, shoot, it's only supposed to last me 20 years. I've got 0 years based upon the factory's anticipation. That's a risk I might want to quantify and might want to do something about. So right here, you see remaining design life. And then effective age. This one is a new one, and I'll try to do my best to explain it. U.S. men have a life expectancy of about 76 years. So I may have gotten a good lab result back from my recent physical that says, hey, Kurt, good job. You got 35 years of remaining service life. But I'm 47, and so really, I have 29 years of remaining design life left. Effective age is where you can say, look, I may be 47, but I've partied hard, I've played hard. My effective age might be in the 60s. You can see different days, you feel different ways. So effective age is regardless of when you were installed, based upon your last assessment, where does it see you? We work out in Guam a lot, and I can say I walk up to those air conditioning units, they don't look like 3-year-old units. You look at them, you're like, man, how many years have been there? How many decades have they been up there? And like, oh, we just installed that last week. So your assessment rating is going to give you now an effective age that you can see in the interface that says, how should I respond to this? I don't respond to a Guam air conditioner as new. Once it's installed, I respond to it as old. It's been there for 3 weeks, get ready to buy a new one. So, from a component perspective, your same description, comments that are available at the facilities, and you have those custom attributes. So, if you want to capture something specific while doing a inventory element, maybe you want to say, give me my refrigerant as a, is it R22? What is it? You can add an attribute directly just that is component specific. Yusuf?
Couple questions.
Yeah.
So I see that it looks like to me, based on what I'm seeing, is that the section detail and the section have collided into one object.
No. So details still exist. I'll get there.
Details still exist.
Yep.
Okay. So when you're generating deferred maintenance, we do it in scenarios. Are they going to give you the option to generate DM based off of any of those new attributes like effective age?
Yes. Yes.
So-
So you can say, I want to re-inspect something with an effective age greater than my.
No, I'm interested in deferred maintenance.
Okay. So you can say, I can replace this because of any of those fields. Yes.
So, but the algorithm's based off of, the curve is still based off of the algorithm hasn't changed. It's
For
just-
the algorithm for calculating remaining service life is still unchanged. You just have visibility into other areas that are behind the scenes, like remaining design life. And you can use that to
But is that
generate.
part of the scenario calculation to produce deferred maintenance?
Yes. It can be if you choose it. The rules for what you generate work for is still user determined.
Okay, but you still have the algorithm.
Yep.
You still have the curve that you have to deal with.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One other quick preview that I'll showcase, mission dependency is now available at the component level. So, if you are just now trying to think about how do I get MDI at the building, it might be too early to go down to the component level, but nominally, CERL is supporting, the SMS Technical Center of Expertise, I'll have to get used to that, is supporting the idea of you can put in a number, a mission dependency index, at the component level as well. This might be more helpful in your site components, like my transformers are super critical for my facility, so I want to give it a number. All right, so back to that list view of all of our components. I was hoping you would come up and say, how easy is it to create a component? So I can say, look, I have some slides. But it's the same thing that you would expect to see, where what is the name of this thing, in what building, in what site, what is the area of uniformat, that classification, it's a chilled water system, that specification, is it active, how many do I have, when was it installed, and an alternate ID right there. If you are able to have linkage between your CMMS and ESMS, that alternate ID is a good place to put maybe an equipment record. So you can have that one-to-one map of a component to Maximo has an ID. Yeah, I gotta get to Mike. We have a healthy online audience. Sorry, Ronaldo. Yep.
What if you already have 40,000 components with an equipment ID? Would you then have to move it to alternate ID?
Nope. We still have section details with IDs.
Okay.
So-
Awesome. Thank you.
Yusuf's already hit me up. We're not going to need to break our integration tool set, but this is a uniformat driven buildings area. But in the catalog, you can have different formats. So I'm not as familiar with waterfront or water control structures, but it may be a different classification that you want to use to group things. You can have different classification styles. And as looked at, when you scroll down in the component view, you have the same details that you would have in section details. Section details are where, if you think of it from a planning perspective and a resource allocation perspective, 3 pumps, 3 half-horsepower pumps in the same room that were installed at the same time of the same equipment type can be planned about as a single unit. I have 3 things that cost $500 each. It's a $1,500 section with 3 details because they have an individual serial number. ESMS plans to support mapping over all of your section detail elements into component details now. So if you go into details, you get your description components, but this next level is where you're looking for, which is component details, and you add that plus button. As soon as you add plus, it's the same thing that you've seen over and over again. Capacity, location, equipment type, make, model, serial number, ID number for data linkage, make, and the same things you've seen in Builder. All right. It is 2:04. I would love to get into assessments, but I feel like we need a little bit of a stand-up post-lunch. But I do want to keep it quick because we are on slide 50 of 137. So, we are at 2:04. We'll start back at 2:15. Enjoy your stretch. All right. Let's everybody come on back in. Start to make your way back to your seats. These 90 slides are not going to advance themselves. It's a valid question. If I'm just starting in this world, should I work? ESMS is coming down the pipe. Talk to Matt about how fast, and depending upon who you work for, maybe you just wait for ESMS, maybe you jump in and plan to migrate. How much on the bleeding edge of technology do you want to play? The leading edge is the bleeding edge. All right, I'm going to get going. Make sure you get an afternoon. Otherwise, I'm going to have to bring out cots for everybody to take a nap in the conference room. So the first hour was really to step you through basic navigation, where the primary functions are, where you can get your user permissions, and then stepping through inventory. We are, for the next little bit, going to dig into assessments. I say this word specifically because the builder inspections are completely revamped. This is trying to say, from an assessment plan perspective, this is a brand new feature to ESMS. How can I manage a major or contracted assessment effort in a consistent manner? Back to the SMS Technical Center of Expertise looking to address pain points. There are agencies that had 7 different concurrent assessment teams at different parts of the globe at the same time, gathering data, pushing it back in, doing quality assurance, and then trying to manage that process. And if we know one thing about Builder, it requires consistency to be any value. So, to that end, I see that they've built out this assessment plan capability to help keep it consistent. If you see valuable for your program, you can click into, after you get down to the assessment plans, get into details, and you can say, I'm using John Doe, but this might be a Hurricane Maywar inspection effort. I'm going to put together a charter. We just had a major hurricane in Guam. Maywar came through, extensive winds up to 100 miles an hour. We need to go out and do an inspection. We have some money to attach to this effort. We have a date. We have a site that it's supposed to be happening in. And you can actually identify your pre-assessment template, your assessment template, and a user that is managing this effort. This is brand new thing that I've never seen, Builder lean into, where it's trying to help you run projected efforts. You may have within that site a subset of building assets that you want to include in that assessment. We've seen people use a builder complex to say, hey, while I'm at that one installation, I'm going to create a temporary complex just for this contract ID. So you can move buildings into a complex with a contract number, go out, do your thing, get the data accepted, get paid, and walk away, and then you move the buildings out of the complex and you carry on and have a nice day. This allows you to say, I'm not going to try to create a temporary complex, I'm just going to create an assessment plan. What buildings should they be inspecting? Do I want them to create work items while they're actually gathering data? A emergency disaster response may not want to wait for the annual builder, assessment plan work. You might say, I really want the advice of the assessment team to create work items associated with the components that they inventory live and in the field. So, I mentioned that it is connected to components. These ad hoc work items must be related to something that is in the inventory. You don't just get to say, make the building prettier project. You actually have to say, no, I'm going to actually replace the windows, I'm going to paint the outside. So you have to find those components that meet that work need. Your pre-assessment team is your ability to set users that say, we're going to give them permissions to do this work for this time. And then you might want to validate real property. You might want to do some initial questionnaires with your pre-assessment and have that be a very different user set than your actual assessment teams that are going out there and then quantifying the condition as they see it. Your field questionnaires can be uploaded. If consistency is the thing, if you talk to every one of the assessment companies out there and say, hey, what questions do you ask in the field for the local facility managers, they're probably going to have a 90% overlap. They all ask generally the same questions. But why not a blessed single template that you want everybody to fill out? And it's known, you're not asking the contractor to pay to create one because we know this is the template that you're supposed to fill out. Ask about dates, major problems, renovation challenges. You can have that questionnaire ready to go in your plan. And last, you can create a work package. So this is where I'm stretching outside of my live experience working with it, but my understanding is it's a document upload where you say, I'm trying to accomplish something, and you can say, is there a specific DoD site code? Is there business entity description, estimated cost? So you can just create a work package that is tied to an assessment plan. This is completely optional. If this does not relate to you, you're not forced into it, but it can be confusing when you see, I'm just trying to pick a direct rating. What is a plan here? This is for you to say, I have a group that's going out to these assets with these team members. This is what they're going to ask when they get out on site, and I'm going to look for this type of work package when it's completed. And help manage that operations side. Assessments in the interface is when you are just going to go without a plan. It sounds bad, but you still have to set it up. Before you can actually add a direct rating, you must create an assessment. So this is where you're saying, this is the type of assessment questionnaire, or this is the evaluation criteria that I have to have for this type of thing. It is a bit daunting. It looks like you're, have a lot of barriers to actually putting in a direct rating. But if you think about the fact that a water control or fuels storage assessment is going to be very different than your facility assessment. Your facility assessment is going to be very different than a stormwater assessment. So you're going to ask different questions. You're going to have different criteria, different scoring. So before you do so, you set it up. So after inventory, you get to the assessments. You're going to see those that have already been created. And you can say, maybe it's my internal team. We had a typhoon. I want to do a Windows assessment. So you create an assessment and you say, this is for my Windows, for these facilities, all within this site. I'm going to look at just this area of Uniformat. I'm going to ask them to perform a direct rating during that assessment. And you have a date, and do you allow samples? So this is from a programming perspective, do you say, what do I want someone to do? Even if it's not necessarily a formal team member contracted effort with a budget, you just say, go, do this assessment. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit like, whoa, there's a lot of steps. Your assessments are not just direct rating anymore. You have the option for distress surveys, functionality. There is no real separation between functionality assessments and condition assessments in Builder. There is only assessments. This is a major separation. We've had people say, I would really like to use the direct rating, but for us, when you're actually going out and do something, I want to know if there's a code issue right while I'm doing my condition. It's not enough to say, here's where it is in its life cycle. I want to know, is there something obscuring that electrical panel? Do I have contamination that I need to deal with? It's not a failure due to life cycle, but it's a failure due to something else. I need more information. In ESMS, you have the flexibility and the power to create new assessment types. So, direct ratings are certainly one of the options, and when we migrate your data in, a lot of it will come in as a direct rating. But once you create an assessment, and as I mentioned, it could be a functionality assessment that you do at the asset level, or it could be a direct rating that you do at the component level. If you wanted to, you could say a direct rating specific to HVAC or cooling generation. And now, when anybody does a direct rating on their cooling areas of Uniformat, it asks them what is the refrigerant. It doesn't necessarily need to change the score, but it can be a question that you ask. You can see, is there an opportunity to understand energy efficiency while doing a direct rating? It's not enough to know, is this toilet gonna fail? Is it also dumping 10 gallons of water every time somebody flushes? That's a valuable data point, and why would I have them stop their direct rating, go all the way over to a functionality assessment just to be able to say it is not low flow? You could have a plumbing direct rating that you pick your green, amber, reds, and then you say water inefficient. Now you can run a report in ESMS and say, just show me all my components that are more than 10 years old that are shown as not water efficient. Now, where power comes responsibility and comes setup, right? You're going to have migrated over direct ratings. We have a lot of momentum in that training for green, amber, red. Programs are going to need to reset their own desires and say, is green, amber, and red all I want to know moving forward? Or do I want a more sophisticated and nuanced inspection dependent upon a building? Maybe I want to look at ADA at the building. Maybe I want to look at occupancy level at the facility. But while I'm doing a component inspection, I want to see code compliance issues. I want to see efficiency issues. I want to see aesthetic issues separate from, but right alongside life cycle. Those evaluations of your assessments can but don't necessarily have to impact score. So we're trying to get a condition index score out of every component, put it on its life cycle. We're going to have some fun to say, re-engage your clients. What are the data points that you need that haven't come from Builder, but you would like in ESMS moving forward? Any questions or concerns out the gate? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. I had a question about when you mentioned dam assessment. Is this going to be changing for dams at the lake projects and reservoirs? Is the intent to take over the operational condition assessment?
So, and this is my external read. This is a federally developed program for real property side. So, especially if it's a dam or aqueduct on federal land, there's certainly going to be some desire to say this might be a good tool to use. If it's DoD managed, then I would say that that has a higher likelihood of pressure. I would love to see everybody use it for all the things, but we certainly need to build out a component. Before you can start doing an assessment of and quantification of inventory on a lake, well, how are we going to break a lake into its subcomponents, and what is the life cycle of the barrier? I don't know, but it's a good question that I think it'll happen. All right, so back to the interface. Yeah, go ahead.
How much work is involved in generating and maintaining all of that data? Given that most of us who are on the customer side have an extremely limited resource set, how much work is involved in all of that?
You are 100%. I mentioned that you could go crazy on groups. You can also go crazy on complicated assessments that extract a lot of information that you don't use. Here's the thing. We're going to go into document management. I talked about photos. I don't care if it looks pretty or not. If you don't use a photo in Builder for any of your organizational level planning and programming, why are you spending money to put it in there? So the value for the data has to be represented in the reduction of risk. So if that assessment detail about occupancy rate when you're looking at a building, well, it looks like the building's only half utilized. It's a nice question to ask, but if nobody is using that to make a decision, please don't spend the money to gather that data. It has to be worth the investment. I think there was a question online.
Yeah, it says, issue we have is an HVAC system and can run well, but that doesn't tell us if it is balanced or sized correctly for the facility, which can have symptoms like growth and or rust.
So an undersized piece of equipment will certainly lower in its condition faster than normal. That's where an inspection of a direct rating can say, I need to program money to replace this sooner. But certainly a configuration element where you say its controls are not secure. We got to update the firmware, or we need to change out this because we can't buy parts, or it's a known IT risk going forward. That is one of those things you can put into your assessment plan or your assessments templates to say, while going out there and doing a look at these things that have integrated systems, also do a cybersecurity audit. Does it reach out and connect to an external IP? Is it trying to be managed by a third party that's not stateside? Oh, sorry. I thought you were walking up to the mic, but.
Okay, so quick question on assessments, specifically talking functional assessments, functionality assessments.
Yes.
Are we still going to get the BFI or the FI value specifically from that? And can we only get that BFI value if we create a very specific functional assessment? How's that going to work?
So in the assessment detail, you'll see that there is an assessment type, and that will determine, does it inform your condition or functionality score? So you can get an independent CI and FI value, which will blend to your performance index score. Absolutely. So, from the interface, we have said that we're going to do a window assessment, and ta-da, we've created it. You think, I can put a flag in the ground, success, but if you look down at my little red box, that direct rating has 0 results because I still have not evaluated anything. So, completing an assessment does not generate a CI score in ESMS. Only when you evaluate that assessment do you actually give it a score. So in your evaluation, you see that there's that drop down for direct ratings. You can add a comment, you can add a photo, and then when you hit save, that's when you've evaluated it. You can evaluate multiple things, obviously, in an assessment, saying this is a full Windows, but it does take that evaluation to generate a CI. So let's go through that example one more time because language is challenging. We actually sent a request for Searle because we've seen assessment type, assessment template, assessment sets, assessments, and evaluations, and we're like, all right, can we get a breakdown of all these? And I think that the language is going to be refined a little bit for consistency, but the general idea is an assessment set you can use for planning, assessment plans, or which you can use for a contracted major effort. Say, this is my scope I'm going to try to accomplish. Your assessments are when you say, these are the things specifically I want to look at right now, and then only when you generate an evaluation do you get a direct rating. So, for my user, I see 17 result assessments that I can take action on. If I go in there, I see that there is an opportunity to provide a direct rating for this specific window area. If I click into the edit, you can change the name, you can add some comments, and then if you scroll down in that assessment, you see there's an option to hit direct rating. You click that evaluation, which generates those 2 questions. What is the direct rating? And do I have a paint rating that I would like to comment on? You hit that, hit save, and now you see I have a condition index of 50. I know it's intimidating at first. I'd say, to try to get to 30 clicks to get to a color seems daunting, but the power is there to gather a large variety of information to help fulfill different needs. Energy needs, efficiency needs, cyber needs, you name it, you can blend it here into that condition and assessment side. The other piece that I'll mention is that we are exclusively talking about the web application. I don't know how many of you have tried to crawl in a basement and go through your assessments with a browser window, open up to a website, and found that that's streamlined and fast. There is an offline tool that will be a companion to ESMS. I believe that that companion tool for offline is going to be more tactically executable. You go in, you have a user, you have assignments, you do this, questions for these things, and then you hit save and you push it back to the web. It was not even in the original ESMS plan to support adding inspections directly through the browser. So, this is bonus. You can do it, even if it takes you a while. I think that the offline tool will certainly give you a more streamlined, these are the questions I need to ask. The reason that I go through all that excruciating detail is that we have so many program leads in the room. Now you can broaden your horizon. Have I ever wanted to gather more than just a direct rating? Distress surveys were a fun concept, a bit overwhelming, and it generated some weird numbers, but maybe I want to make that distress not a comment, I want to make it a drop down. Fine, why not? It's data that we can more cleanly report on later. So, you're going to have your experts from the SMS technical expertise. You're going to have consultants that are going to help you through this process of building it, but really from an organizational perspective and from the advisor perspective, what should that high value question be? Every data point that you gather, quality assure, and maintain costs money, so what's worth it? What's worth it for you? All right. Now you know why I wanted you guys to stretch before starting assessments. The next piece that I'm going to jump into is for work. So we talked about the fact that you could identify funding at the organization. So bumping a little bit up that hierarchy back into the organization, just like Builder, you can identify funding sources like SR&M, Alumni Fund, my CAP Improvement Fund. You can identify what money is available, what years. And then you can say, give me restrictions. Not all money is the same. Especially, in the federal space, Milcon, SRM, you have a modernization. Like, you can't just say, I have this pocket of money and I can use it to mow a lawn or demolish a building. It just doesn't work that way. So you can say, I expect this funding and then I want to restrict it. Here's the exciting part. I've been trying to get funding working at an organization level for years. You could see that there's a desire to say, I would love to level set and understand what I can and can't afford. But if you set a funding source at the top organization, money goes to the highest priority, regardless of where you are. So when Builder in your scenarios racks and stacks all your work items, it says, let's hit the top priority. That means that if you have an old site with a bunch of buildings that are just past their prime, let's say, they're going to get the lion's share of money and potentially starve another installation that has more new buildings that doesn't have the same, according to Builder, priority score. And that just isn't real life. You cannot overwhelm one location with all the money, they just can't execute it, and you can't starve another location that still needs to keep the lights on. So, this is the first place that I've seen at the organization level, you can say this funding source can only be used for this installation. And now we can go through, if you identify for Space Force, those 12 sites with Buckley's going to get this, and Los Angeles Space Force Base is going to get this. You can set the funding at the organization and run analysis once. You can also put in the normal restrictions like it must be applied to work greater than $50,000, or it must be used for things that have had an inspection value lower than 50 in the last 3 years. All of those rules can be put in, but now you can do so at the site level as well. So after you've saved that funding source and its restrictions, you're going to see at that site level, here is the money that is available to me in the funding amount. You can see that nothing has been obligated and nothing has been committed. So you have a remaining balance that matches what's available. That means we haven't done any work. We haven't said, what should I do? And here's something that's actually budgeted or funded. Which leads me into work configuration. Yay! So, yes, I know. I've been training for 12 years, and work configuration, work analysis is always on day 3 because you have to understand inventory and you have to be able to understand your inspection lifecycle curves to be able to generate work. But no matter what, I've never left that day 3 with a, we've got it, you can carry on, we have everything we need. Life hasn't changed, it's gotten bigger. Your repair and replace activities in Builder that you're used to are now a global repair, which is a good name for what the Builder repair was, which is a full recapitalization to near new. And you still have replace activities, but now we have local repair, inspection, and maintain. It is still the same basic rules where you get to say, this is the things I have in my inventory, this is the components that I have, and this is the rules by which I'm going to say it needs to be maintained, inspected, provided a local repair, provided a full renewal to near new, or replaced with a brand new piece of equipment. This is more encompassing than I've seen, and I think it gives some insight into what the SMS Technical Expertise Center is being directed to take on. Their primary audience being DoD, and maybe even more so specifically the Army, does not have a unified CMMS for preventative maintenance, for inspection requirements. We had the knowledge-based inspection tool in the past, but it didn't really work the way people could use it. So they took an opportunity to say, if we have the ability to identify these rules for replacement activities, let's genericize that and allow users to use those same types of rule logic to say, what should I inspect and when? And builder can come up with a cost of how much your inspections are going to be for the next 5 years. When do I need to maintain that piece of equipment? It's pretty exciting. So here is the screenshot that shows you how it's laid out, and I think that the names are still probably able to be changed, but your work analysis is where all things work creation come from. There is no scenarios anymore. There's no work plan anymore. It is all work analysis, because if you're generating work for 1 year, you used to be able to do it in a work plan, or you could create a 1-year scenario. The numbers never really aligned exactly, and that was always a bit odd. But why would you have 2 different capabilities and 2 different features that do the same thing? Now we have one unified work analysis. And this is where you get to say, I have a standard that I've created called critical. Your first decision is a scope decision. What are the components that I consider critical? Maybe I'm going to reuse that group for DHA that I said critical for OR. I want to maintain that at a higher level. So their scope is to say, what should meet this standard? Your medium standard might be more of your doors, more of your windows, your exterior envelope elements. Your low standards that you're saying, I'm really going to let those things exist in my ESMS where I can see and quantify the risk, but not really generate money unless it's actively failing. Your foundations, superstructure, stairwells. You get to name those standards anything that you want that helps you think about what in my inventory needs to be treated differently. This is about when do I generate the financial ask. And that financial ask can be one of 5 different things. The first one, and let me see if I can actually zoom in. A global repair. Do I want to do a full renewal on that generator that's at an 80? Probably not. You know, that's a little bit early in its life to give it a full recapitalization. So maybe you want to wait till it gets in a lower condition, but not quite so bad that it needs to be replaced. Maintenance. You can create a rule that says every 2 years, I want someone to go out and maintain that generator. Or whatever cycle is appropriate for your needs. Now remember, this is a critical equipment. So if that generator is critical, it can have one schedule. If that generator is on a medium priority or medium standard, it can have a very different schedule for that maintenance. Maybe a critical backup generator gets maintained annually, where you're checking and replacing belts and hoses. Maybe for a low criticality generator, you just look at it every 3 years. Your inspection can have rules for timelines. Your replacement activity, which generates most of your deferred maintenance, your repair needs, those are going to be what you're used to seeing, which is, hey, I've dropped below this many years of remaining service life, I want to replace it. But you can also use things like remaining design life. Regardless of how good an assessor thought my water heater is, I only have this many years of remaining design life left, or it's -5 years of remaining design life. Let's replace it anyways. I'm not comfortable with that risk in my organization. And then a local repair. I love this. It has been really hard to give assessors guidance on the amber ratings. If it's an amber, and it's like, well, I want to fix something, it's not a big deal. I don't want a full recap, but there is a leak that should be addressed. Now you can actually say, if my assessor value from a past inspection is amber or amber minus, trigger a local repair. Don't do anything but that. So, quick recap. Your standards, you get to name, you're always going to have a default, but you can name it if you have a special rule for different elements of your facility, your different components. Your scope is where you identify, is it a system perspective? Like, is everything in my electrical system a medium? Everything in my interior finish system a low? That's the scope. What components apply to what standard? And then your rules are where you get to say specifically, for this critical global repair, I'm looking for the last inspection CI to be something and the current predicted condition index. Those two rules stack to make a, do I fail this rule? Everything that fails the rule asks for money. And you can ask for 5 different kinds of money. Do I want to maintain it? Do I want to inspect it? Do I want a local repair? Do I want a global, full renewal? Or do I want to replace? So, you thought standards and policy sequences were fun before, where you only had 2 things. Now, 5. Yay. PhDs. Let's see here for researchers. But powerful is the thing. It gives you a lot of control over what you want to generate and ask for money for. And if you don't have a good PM program, you can use this as a shortcut to say, give me the things that I need to look at from an inspection perspective. I've got a full inventory in Builder. Why not use it to generate a PM list? All right. So that is the how do I get the money ask. Once we get to the ask, why would we want to care about prioritization? I've had one trip in my life where I've asked that question and they just looked at me blankly and says, I don't need to prioritize everything. Everything we ask for, we get, money-wise. Any ideas? I hear Air Force, some from Navy people are in there. Bill's saying, be quiet. Actually, launch stool. And I really can't begrudge them for that. If you are a hospital serving our military men and women that are fighting, I want you to get the projects that you need to be able to offer the world-class medical care. But for the rest of us, prioritizing work allows us to say, with limited resources, what should I look at first? And this is important for those long-term scenario analysis, where if you're able to say, this is how much money I have for these different restrictions, this is the color of money, this is the sites that should have this kind of money, and then this is my, maybe I get an end of year plus up money. You can put the priority score in there to say which should fall on the top of that list and which should be thought about later. Still documented, still available as a quantifiable risk, but not necessarily at the top of the list for attention. I like having work standards for what I want to replace completely isolated from prioritization. People will oftentimes say, I only want to ask for the amount of money that I think I can get. And I say, no, you are professionals. You know what you would want to do in a perfect state. You want to keep that elevator maintained and replaced when it needs it. You want to do that local repair on your doors and make sure your egress is smooth and access for fire safety. You want that, but ask for the things that you want for minimal risk, but then prioritize it based upon what you get. Rarely do the people that do the asking also have the power of the purse. So, as a professional, make your ask, and then do your best job at reducing risk with what they give you. I had a question online.
Is global repair just a full replacement of a component?
No, a global repair is not a full replacement. It is a full renewal. So if you think about, pardon me? Yeah, a chiller has a lot of moving parts. If you replace everything that moves or is rubber or wears out, the shell can be the same, and you can have some electrical elements that still exist, but it's renewed to near new status. It's the condition index of 95. A replacement is a scrape the, clear, throw that one in the trash, throw a brand new one on. That sadly will probably last half as long as the last one. I don't know why, but all right. So prioritization. It is very similar to what you're used to in the past, where you get to create rules to say, I want to look at the failure probability, the failure consequence, and you get to assign priority points based upon everything that we know about that component. Your mission dependency index is what I'm most fond of, because if that is a door to a data center, that might be a whole different level of criticality than a door to a barracks or an office building. So if you have the ability to say, mission dependency-wise, the consequence of that door failing or that electrical panel failing is much higher for my organization, I want that at the top of my list. Here's where you get to do so. I'm not going to get into all the interface because already people glaze over just at the thought of prioritization rules. But you can create these profiles to say, this is how I'm looking at the world and asking for money. This is my Space Force policy. It could be, this is my more facility manager view on lens, where they really only look at sustained assets. You can limit your work generation to your audience and say, for this profile, I'm going to generate work and prioritize it in a way for this audience. For this profile, I want to do it a different way. Similar to how you used to be able to create a scenario, run your analysis, generate your work items, and then maybe repair needs is different than deferred maintenance. Maybe your SRM is different than your modernization costs. You can generate an individual policy that says, these are the standards I'm going to use. These are my cost books. These are my domains. And use this funding source. After you set up that policy, after you set up that profile, you can hit that magic generate work items list. And there you have, for this profile, this is the money I'm asking for. I would see a preventative maintenance profile as a natural thing that you might want isolated. I just want to run a PM list. What have I not inspected in the past 3 years? Give me that list right now, please. I want to send that spreadsheet to somebody else to go out and act on it. It doesn't affect your condition index. It doesn't affect anything in Builder or in SMS at all. See, I finally did it. But you can export that to Excel. Or if you really do like that profile, if you say, this is what I want to use and I want to actually manage my work items, you can copy those as work items for updates. Once you move them into your work items area, that's when you can actually say this is funded, this is complete, and you can manage those to completion. So, your scenario engine is now captured in your work analysis profile. You could imagine that if you are trying to run a simulation for 20 years of give me all of my work items, all of my inspections, all of my local repairs, all my global repairs for 2 billion square feet for the next 20 years, it could require a few CPU cycles to do so. This last area is queue, where you can see if you hit that generate work items button and the work items are not available right away, that's because you are in queue for completion. It's working on it. It's thinking it'll get back to you when it can. If you copy that work item list from your work analysis into work items, this is where that same chart, view, export to Excel table is available, but you can also dig into the details. And if you want to say, hey, this is now funded, this work item for my exterior windows I found through my inspections at 50, do the work, hit funded, it removes it from your FCI and now EFCI calculation because it's not a deferred work item, it's been assigned a dollar amount. And if you go into your funding, you can see it's no longer 100% unallocated. Some of that money will have been committed to a work item in Builder. SMS. It's the afternoon, forgive me. And you can also create ad hoc work items. Joe, it's been 2.5 hours, man. Where have you been?
I've only had one question today.
All right.
Is roll-up still going to be a thing in ESMS?
Yes, roll-up is still a thing. I
So-
saw the button. I would imagine that your roll-up would be similar to why it's used in Builder, which is if you do a import from an offline tool set, that would be the time to kick off a roll-up and say, process all this data and give me new condition scores.
Can you assign FCIs by grouping?
So you assign an FCI, right?
Well,
FCI is
it's
generated based upon
calculated.
those components that fail your standards. So if you set a standard that says things in this group need to maintain a higher condition, or I want to inspect more in that group than that group, it changes the dollars that you ask for, which changes the FCI. So groups
Let me ask
they
you-
are available to you.
So another way to ask the question, can FCIs be calculated at the group level to a grouping? Will it roll up that way?
Yeah, I haven't seen a screen. I see FCI as a building level reporting metric, and then it rolls up to the site and organization. I have not seen a group FCI yet, but you can export it to Excel or, talk to Matt and maybe see if we can change the view. Absolutely. Creating ad hoc work items can be useful. If you say that the system that generated my work items missed something that I think is important, maybe we had a hailstorm last night, I don't want to wait for my work planner to go through another analysis thing. I just want to say, my metal roof needs to be replaced, create it on the fly. This is going to add to your dollar amount asked for, which is going to lower your FCI real time. Identify the site, identify the building type, where is it in uniformat, through, is there a specific category that I want to classify this as? Maybe it's an environmental issue, maybe it's just a local need, somebody's moving. What type of work? I want to do a repair, and why? That work classification helps you to say maybe it's a life safety issue, maybe it's an aesthetics problem, and then you can create a work item. Here's where I wanted to click through the 20 slides. Every one of those drop downs about what is the type of work, what is the classification, is available for you to change. Those are stored back end in the database, but if you say life safety isn't relevant to us, but aesthetics is, all right, well, then we can change that. When I say we, the SMS team can change that drop-down list and say, what are the work classifications that make sense to you when generating work items or when you are working with your work items on a daily basis. Now you see that the Navy Barracks has windows as a work item, and the last thing in the work area that you can do is create a project. Let me go back. So we've gone through work analysis, where you get to run those short or long-term plans. You can copy those things into your work items, say it's funded, say it's completed, basically assign those dollars, or you can create projects. Right now, projects are building wide. So this is at an asset level. Your project is to say, demo this building, recap the building, like something of that level. I want to do a electrical upgrade to a historic building. This is a project. So give it a title, give it a year, an agent, what domain. And I think that some of the drop downs available to you are specific to a utilities client that used it for a certain way, but it still makes sense that you can say for this asset within this site, I have a building that needs a major effort that's not necessarily a component level effort, it's an asset level effort. And once you've created that project, you can go in, get to the details. You can specifically call out that asset that's linked to the project. It could be one or more buildings. Do I have a funding element, a category, purchase request, fiscal year, MIPR number, you name it, PO number, an amount, all of my milestone dates for construction or deconstruction. You can actually put onto that for a calendar. And then the last one is documents, where you can upload your spec, your as-builts, whatever is necessary to capture that project. For somebody, they said, hey, for this SMS team, we need to manage asset level projects that are not just down at the component level. Optional, but available. All right, it is 3:08. Let's take 5 more minute break. Keep it quick, and then we'll try to make sure we get you wrapped up by 4, so you can have a dinner and enjoy your evening. We are on 118 of 137. We can push for the last section. Really? All right, everybody. If you guys want to continue the conversation and miss out the golden last 30 slides of your 137 slide presentation, I understand, do so in the lobby. So, back in the work projects, there is a link for documents, and you've seen it at different places within the application. You can add documents to organizations, to sites, to facilities, and individual components. This would be a floor plan, this would be a warranty, a specification, a roof map, anything that you think is necessary for understanding what happens next, you can upload. It is still kind of one by one, but it'll be managed in the document library. So if I go to my facility, you see for this building, I've uploaded a floor plan and a facility management guide PDF or reference for the user. Only put documents in the system that adds value that you need for the audience of ESMS. If your facility management team is never going to have an account, having a bunch of documents that help them through their day is not going to provide you much value. The one area that I am going to call out that's a new feature, because you used to be able to do this, is tags. Just like groups, you can tag a document with kind of an attribute. So I could imagine a energy study tag. Maybe you've gone through your site and you've gone through an energy efficiency analysis, and it's not necessarily something that's generating a CI, and it's not fitting directly in the SMS model, but it's a valuable reference that you can use. Maybe the completed work report out of GFIBS for the last year for that building. You want to upload and put in that building so that when somebody comes out and does an inspection, they can see, oh, this is what I worked on last year. You can tag all of those same documents with the same tag. So if it is past work requests, you just say work request is the tag. Now when you go in, you can search for, give me all of my documents that connect to the work request tag or energy study tag. All right, so the last area of the left-hand navigation of functionality is your reference books. I mentioned it up front when we were talking about organizations, that you can have a different, maybe cost book, but I'm going to spell it out a little bit more detail. Components importance is where you can say, for every one of my components, this is how I want to scale its relative importance to something else. It is between 0 and 1, so a 0.1 would be a low importance component compared to something that's a 0.9 that would be a high importance. So if you're in Alabama and you're running, or just an air conditioning unit, or your electrical panel switch gear, you might say is absolutely critical for my operations. It has a high components importance. Just like Builder, you can create multiple books, but I would say for your organization, trying to keep it as consistent to one is advantageous. The next is service life. For the system to know my effective age, or to give me a remaining design life, it has to know what was I designed to last for. I'm 67-year-old design life according to, 87. US thinks that I'm supposed to live for 87 years, so if you saw a component called adult white male, it would be 87. You can actually see that there is still opportunities to support a paint life, but I've never seen investment in that catalog, so I would still recommend avoiding trying to identify something as painted or coded in ESMS. So each domain is going to have your list of components, and it's going to have a design life. Your inflation multiplier is so that when you generate those long-term plans, you can see spend now for money or spend more in the future. You have to be able to guess at what the future inflation rate is, and you're no longer limited to 10 years. So your inflation can go out to up to whatever your imagination is willing to plan for. Me personally, I have a short horizon of planning, so I think the robots will take over by 2025, so we're good. Just keep it what you can plan for. And then you have your cost, your cost books. So in this, we have an RS means source of data for an individual component. We have some catalog component cost, but it is more detailed than before. So let me show you for an individual cross record now, and I'll actually zoom in. We can capture the unit cost, a minimum cost, a labor cost, so that would calculate into a bare total cost, your daily output, equipment and material costs. For the ESMS to be able to plan what your maybe global repair versus a local repair versus replacement versus inspect, it needs to know more about what that thing would cost. So they've asked for and shown the capability for the component catalog to capture those different types of costs. You also have far more granular attributes. It used to be, well, it still is, in your catalog, you're going to see this is an air handler, rooftop mounted, 30-ton stainless steel, well, how it's mounted is kind of an attribute. The fact that it has a tonnage capacity is also an attribute. What it's made out of, its material, is also an attribute. So they have the ability in the catalog to say, we have a base thing called an air handler, and now we're going to also have attributes that talks about how it works. Is it belt drive, chain drive, steam driven? What is the material type? What is the capacity from a tonnage perspective? When I was asked as a sidebar, I've been in the system and like you can see there's some data in there. Kurt, is it ready? Can I start, working with you guys and pushing data in and running reports? The biggest thing I can see from the staging perspective that isn't available yet is a consolidated and validated catalog. I cannot move data into a staging environment if I don't know which thing it is and it doesn't have a reasonable cost and a design life. All the metrics depend upon those two things. So I know it's actively being worked on, and I bet that the staging environment, because it's the Wild West of testing, has everybody playing and creating components. But it means that I'm seeing things that don't make sense and it's not ready for large-scale import just yet. So here we go. For your catalog description, that used to be just a long text stream. Now in ESMS, you're going to have a type. You're going to have a uniformat classification, a D301001, and then attributes of, is it reciprocating? Is it air-cooled? What is the tonnage? And then what is the material cost? What is the replacement cost? What is the unit cost? What are the hours required? The awesome thing is it doesn't require a back-end database to create new components anymore. With the right permissions, you can modify the description, you can add a new classification. We've talked about in examples, Tesla's rolling out their solar roofs. I haven't seen an installation with panels that generate electricity just yet, but I'm sure that it's going to happen one of these days. So there is the desire to say, I want the ability to create components of that catalog so I can create a valid inventory with good costs and good design lives. The interface supports it directly with the right permissions. You don't have to mess with the database anymore. Every time you go to the back-end database to modify something or add a new record, you introduce a potential failure point of not working with your data imports. You have bread files checked out and now they've got a different lookup. It generates challenges that need to be managed. So having something directly planned for that Searle knows they've been modifying the catalog every couple of weeks for any number of clients, we needed to build the application that thought about that workflow from the very beginning. And more specificity to that cost. So each work activity has the ability to generate that cost. Repair costs for that global repair are not just a parametric estimate on the replacement. You can set that within your catalog. And your minimum work cost, I don't know if you noticed it before, on one of the slides, is not a global $65. I still don't know the origin of that number, but if you ever see your work plan and something says it's cost $65, that's because somebody in the admin set that as your minimum work item cost. I would love to see somebody replace my boiler for $65 or do anything for $65. They barely call me for that. Now you can say at that component level, if I'm touching it, it has a minimum of this cost. So you can have a global and then a component level minimum. The next, I know costs are a big thing. Is there anybody that has any questions? As I mentioned, that there's still, in the staging environment, work to be done to refine the catalog, but I see the capabilities. A quiet audience is ready for dinner. I see that. Okay. I'm like, nobody wants to talk about money.
And I spent like 30 years planning. And so what we found, basically, we would use means to try to estimate, do an estimate for a project. And honestly, the actuals would come in 2 to 3 times what basically we calculated as an estimate. So how does it work? Who does that analysis between estimated and actual? And how often is the
Right.
catalog updated? There's so many
So many questions.
Yeah.
Quick, is there somebody from Gordian in the room? Oh, come on. I mean that in no shade whatsoever. It was just kind of an answer to the question. I know that the Gordian team will talk to you about their survey process, but that is a baseline unit cost. And certainly, I would say, we own a building that we work out of. If I went and said, give me a cost per foot for carpet, and then somebody in the intelligence community says, I need a cost per foot for carpet, that's a very different number, just because of the security, overhead, design, contracting requirements. So that is a great lead-in to cost modifiers. The baseline unit cost is probably not valid for anybody in the room. Nobody can get the commercial rack rate. So you should embrace the fact that you should modify your costs at whatever level is right. A site modifier is for your regional labor costs and regional costs on equipment, but you may have certain other things that you're saying, my organization within Federal Bureau of Prisons means that it's about 2 to 3 times for me to do the work just because of what I need to do from a design perspective and what I require the contractor to perform. So you can put those modifiers in and get those costs better. I will say that my understanding is that Gordian is providing an annual update to RS Means component catalog costs right now in Builder. I am yet to talk to anybody at Gordian yet about how they're supporting the ESMS, but I believe that the relationship is good in migrating to and preparing for what is next. The survey and the research behind where did they get that cost per foot or where did they get that unit cost for labor and materials, you'll have to go to them, but I believe that there's an in-depth defendable research process, and that's how they became the go-to standard. So cost modifiers. You can have a library of available modifiers that you wish to apply to your buildings or sites. So if you do have a historic building that you say, hey, for us to work in this, it's just a lot more. You can say, we're going to create a modifier type called historic, and it has a 2x multiplier. So anything that I set to that, any asset that I set to that type of historic, it uses that modifier to say, now all the work and all the components in that are twice as expensive. The twice as long to get approval, that's the harder part. So you get to name your modifier, tell it is it an adder or a multiplier, and what is that amount, and should it affect the building PRV. Once you've created that book of available modifiers, you see that it's available in your asset level. So if you said, I have an asset level modifier called historic, when you go into your facility assets, you can say, hey, this should use that modifier. It was one of the pluses. All right, we are screaming through slides. We are now at 132 of 137. Congratulations. The room is still not emptied out. I am shocked. You don't understand. I've been building this for weeks, and it's just too many. It's just too many. All right. After we get through the reference books, there is an import-export utility that is available. You can have a structured export file format that says, hey, I want to, as you see, pull in buildings. And so you can create this report to say either standardize a scrub where you're saying, give me data, or here's an import, make these 10, 20 changes. Create all 50 buildings with this import. You get to define that file format in the configuration utility. So it is something that is going to be certainly an expert power user, but I wanted to show that it's available. And for those that are also concerned about the fact that there is not an offline data capture tool right now, there is no bread equivalent that I can show you. This offers the closest thing I can say is put it out to a spreadsheet, gather some data in the field through a marked up spreadsheet, and then come back to the web and then have them accept all your updates. I don't know what that file format looks like. This is one of those areas that is going to be an area that we need to dig into and test the limits of. I don't know what those limits are. I just see that the feature is there. And while we're talking about, areas for deep research, in your user profiles, if your permissions have been enabled, there is a developer resources. So if you're not powerful user enough that really enjoy flat files and you want to work with the API, you can programmatically connect to this database and scrub data, pull things out, make modifications, add things. Every bit of this systems interface is driven through APIs. So when you hit a page and you're changing a component quantity and hitting save, it's making behind the scenes an API call that says, hey, this quantity is now 32, not 30. Save that in the database. Every one of those APIs are exposed in that developer portal tool where you can see what they expect and what they response is. So I've removed some things to try to obscure the URLs, but it is available for you to play with as a developer. I would say this is an area that is going through the most amount of churn in the application. I wouldn't hard code any of your integration tool sets just yet. It is likely to change quite significantly. Any questions from systems import-export? You want to? So it is JSON, but it's an API. So it's a RESTful API. Their portal for exploring it on the web and saying, like, give me a sample of Git buildings, it's through Swagger. So there's a question online.
Sorry, getting back to it. Do you know if Searle or IBM are working on making the ESMS and Maximo compatible? Also, if we have assets in Maximo, can they be imported into ESMS and vice versa?
So if you use the API or one of those import-export utilities, I would understand that functionally it's possible with the right permissions. I do not know what specifically Maximo or Manage is working on with the SMS team, but I do know that probably IBM Maximo has the greatest install base of any one system in the room. So there is likely going to be a strong desire to make that interplay as seamless as possible. From our perspective, we have an integration tool set. We've already been exploring the APIs enough to pull down and make ESMS data look like and act like builder data so that we can keep all of our tool sets working as is until we completely revamp to take advantage of all the flexibility and all the power of the new stuff.
So my question is specifically on imports. To your knowledge, will we be able to import mass assessments, like many assessments at once?
I don't know what the limits are of the mass, but it seems as though they have a data import where you specify what information you want from the export, and then you can import changes.
Thank you.
All right. So the next piece is reporting. The data is not any good if you can't tell a story, if you can't get the money to execute. You need to have the right reports to do so. I told you that there was no pinwheel of death from hitting a plus from Builder, but when I got to the reporting page on ESMS, it did not load. So as of 2023, no reports are available on staging. But I say that a bit tongue in cheek. I know that they actually do work. They're just not available for me on staging. Matt Walters is going to be out tomorrow. I believe that he's got a little demo of what they're doing. The work that Buddy is doing with Power BI, and you're going to have better visuals than you can exist right now with the ability to drill through and drill out of your data. So it's not enough to see, hey, I've got a site with a condition index of 22. What in the world? Now, with Power BI, you can say, well, let me drill through that 22 and see what's really going on. Oh, I've got 14 buildings that are waiting to be demolished that are all at zeros. Okay, now I understand why the average. So being able to actually interact with your data in a reporting visual mindset is helpful. It is, however, not the most printable friendly format, but it is great. And you can actually build out Power BI integrated into presentations and give leadership the ability to ask a question and answer it real time if it's tapped in correctly. So this is, from a systems perspective, an important milestone to get past, of getting the Power BI enterprise license working for everybody and having the right reports deployed based upon your permissions, and then giving you the ability to only see the data that you should see. So it's not a small effort, it's monumental and important. Are you ready for slide 137 of 137, everybody? Woo! Enthusiastic, I like it. I wish it wasn't enthusiastic to make me go away. But sections are gone, let them rest in peace. Components are now that foundational data point. This is what has a quantity, this is what has a design life, this is what you do an evaluation on to get a condition, and it has a life cycle. Your component hierarchy has flexibility with groups. It is not a strict pyramid of inheritance that you can only exist in one thing at one time. You can have overlapping groups where it is both mission and functional group for your components. Your user groups and permissions are much more flexible, so you can create those user profiles that are valuable to you, and you can have multiple profiles depending upon where you are in that organization. I want to look at everything, but I only want to edit a little bit. I want to edit a little bit here, I want to edit a little bit there. You can make those permissions appropriate. You can manage some assessment contracts directly in your assessment plans. You have better document management and document tagging. I think one of the key areas that they've leaned heavily into is looking for areas in the application where you have multiple ways to do similar things. You had knowledge-based inspections that generated an inspection report. You had scenarios that generated these long-term work plans, but it wasn't the work plan. The work plan generated 1 or 2 years. So now they said, well, let's bundle all those 3 major feature sets into one work analysis. You used to have inspections and functionality inspections. Well, now we just have assessment evaluations. So where there is ability to, let's consolidate and empower the users. You can, because they're now more flexible, evaluate individual components or full facility assets at one time. You can do that ADA study or that floodplain risk evaluation at your asset level. And you have capabilities to say, how am I going to handle my reoccurring inspections? What about my, local repairs? Your work is much more flexible than it was before. Had a sidebar of, well, Kurt, what do you think? How's it going? You're actually clicking in and playing. I've just captured screenshots so you don't see me struggle. Well, a little bit. You see me struggle. The application certainly needs more guide rails or content level filtering. Right now I can create a chiller and I can do a roof assessment on that chiller. right? It allows you to do all the different things for all the different types of things. So I would say, I'm excited to say, for data consistency and for ease of use, we could use some more content level filtering or guide rails on the interface. I miss seeing the lifecycle curves. I've said that term and I've written it so many times. I would like to see somehow it available. I'm excited to see the offline data capture tool, especially when I started to try to figure out how am I going to train people on what is it going to do, what do you have to do to create a CI? Like, oh, you got 37 steps. Hopefully, that's going to be a much more streamlined environment for offline. And I can tell you that the amount of improvements that I've seen in just the past 2 months, because I'm in there grabbing screenshots, they are working on it every day. There's improvements every day. And once the catalog is finished, we're going to be trying to push in a bunch of data and then see where that edge conditions are. Like I said, I don't mention dates, but I encourage you to explore and play and think. We have the Thursday session where we're saying, all right, do you have training materials? Do you have assessment guides? Do you have, policy documents that mention builder and mention direct rating? How do we need to touch all these different things that have been built up over this past decade to be ready for what's next? So we'll start talking about that on Thursday. But I know it was a lot. I definitely appreciate your attention. Hopefully it's much more loose next 2 days with just hour-long segments, not 3 hours. Thank you, everybody.